My name is Michael Vance, though most people just call me Mike. It's been 5 years, 4 months, and 21 days since I last saw my daughter Emily, according to the official report filed under Trinity County Sheriff's Department case number 734B18. She is classified as a missing person, presumed to have fallen victim to either a wild animal attack or exposure to the elements. That is the official narrative. A clean, convenient explanation that lets the park remain open to hikers and gives insurance companies an excuse to close their files. But it isn't the truth. I'm 49 years old now. Before my life split into before and after, I worked as a wildlife photographer. For 2 decades, I traveled the globe capturing images of the natural world, from Alaska's grizzly bears to the jaguars of Brazil's Pantanal. Before that, I spent 6 years as an Army Ranger. I was trained in tracking, survival, and reconnaissance. I'm not the kind of man given to wild imagination. I know how to move through the wilderness. I know what bear tracks look like. I know the sound of a mountain lion's call. And I can tell the difference between a rock that falls and one that's been thrown. What happened on September 15, 2018, in the Trinity Alps of Northern California was no bear attack. And my daughter was not lost. She was taken. This is my account of that day. I share it not for pity, nor for attention, but as a record, a warning, because whatever took her is still out there, hiding in the deep forgotten places of the world. There are territories better left untouched. Our annual father-daughter trip was a tradition that began when Emily was 10. It was our way of escaping the noise of school, work, and the constant hum of the digital world. By 16, she was as skilled in the backcountry as I was. She could navigate with a topo map, build a fire in the rain, and identify most of the plants and animals of the Pacific Northwest. She had my eyes, but her mother's steady patience. She dreamed of becoming a biologist, and these trips were her living classroom. That September, we planned a 5-day loop into the heart of the Trinity Alps, a rugged and stunning wilderness of glacial granite peaks, alpine meadows, and ancient forests of fir and pine. It is a place both beautiful and unforgiving. Once you're a day's hike in, there's no cell signal, no ranger station, no easy exit. That remoteness was exactly what we sought. We set out from the Long Canyon trailhead on a crisp Tuesday morning. The air was sharp and clean, laced with the scent of pine sap and damp earth. Our packs were heavy but balanced. I carried our tent, a Hilleberg A/AC, along with the cooking gear and my primary camera, a Canon EOS 5D Mark IV, fitted with a bulky 200 to 400 millimeter lens. Emily carried her own gear, and our food supply, strapped to the side of my pack, was my constant backcountry safeguard, a Marlin 1895 SBL guide gun, chambered in 45-70 government. It's a heavy, hard-hitting rifle, powerful enough to stop any animal on the continent. I'd never had to use it for more than firing a signal shot, but I never ventured deep into wilderness without it. The first 2 days were idyllic. We followed rushing streams of glass-clear water, pausing to filter what we needed. We camped in a meadow that opened onto a breathtaking glacial lake. Wildlife was everywhere. A family of black bears gorging on berries across a slope, a herd of black-tailed deer moving quietly through the brush, and high above us, a golden eagle carving slow circles on the wind. The wilderness had its own music, a comforting symphony of jays calling, squirrels chattering, and wind whispering through the pines. Everything about the trip felt perfect, ordinary, until the 3rd day. We were descending from a high pass into a heavily forested valley when the change came. As we crossed below the tree line, the soundscape collapsed. It wasn't a peaceful stillness, but an unnatural void. No birdsong, no chatter of squirrels, not even the usual drone of insects. I'd experienced it before. Nature's hush when a large predator passes through. Everything goes still, waiting. "Dad?" Emily whispered, pausing behind me on the trail. "It's quiet." "I know," I answered, scanning the trees. "Probably just a cat moving through. We'll make some noise." We raised our voices, clapped our hands now and then, but the silence didn't break. It clung to the forest, dense and oppressive, as if we'd stepped into a soundproof room. That creeping sense began to climb my spine, the instinct every woodsman knows. The shift when you realize you are no longer the observer, but the observed. My hand stayed close to the butt of my rifle. That evening, we camped beside a fast-running creek. I picked a spot with open visibility, away from the thickest trees. Still, as night closed in, the unease remained. We sat close to the fire, speaking in hushed voices, but the familiar chorus of the night never came. No crickets, no owls, just the steady rush of the creek and the crackle of burning wood. Around 9 o'clock, the first sound broke through, a sharp, percussive crack that echoed off the ridge across the water. It was the distinct sound of wood striking wood, like someone swinging a bat against a tree trunk. "What was that?" Emily asked, her eyes wide. "Deadfall, probably," I said, trying to mask the unease in my voice. A branch breaking can make a startling noise, sure, but this didn't sound random. It had weight, intention. A minute later, another came, this time from farther down the valley. Then a third, back from the original ridge. A call and response, back and forth. I felt it in my chest, cold certainty. This wasn't natural. No animal I knew made sounds like that, not in any pattern. Quietly, I slid the marlin free and rested it across my lap. Sometime deep in the night, long after we'd taken shelter in the tent, a new sound pulled me out of uneasy sleep. It was low and guttural, a vibration that seemed to travel through the ground itself. Not the scream of a mountain lion, not the huff of a bear. This was deeper, resonant. A sequence of moans and grunts rolled into a single drawn-out howl, mournful and strange, carrying a weight of both intelligence and sorrow. I lay frozen in the dark, heart hammering, one hand wrapped around the cold steel of the rifle. Beside me, Emily's breathing was calm, steady, oblivious. I wanted to believe it was nothing more than an echo, some trick of the wind bending sound through the valley. But deep down, I knew better. Right then, I made the decision. We'd leave at first light. When morning came, the fourth day, the sensation of being watched was stronger than ever. It pressed in from every direction, suffocating. As we packed camp, it felt like 100 unseen eyes were fixed on us. We spoke little. I only wanted us moving, away from that place. While Emily crouched by the creek filtering water, I made one last sweep of our campsite. That's when I saw it. Pressed into a patch of soft mud near the tree line, about 40 yards from our tent, was a track. Not a bear track. Those show 5 toes with long, distinct claw marks. This was different. It looked like a human footprint, but impossibly large and strangely proportioned. The ball was unnaturally wide, the arch deeply defined, and 5 thick toes stood out clear as day. I wear a size 12 boot. I set my foot beside the print, and it looked small, almost childlike in comparison. From my camera bag, I pulled a small measuring tape I always carried. The print measured just over 18 inches long and nearly 8 inches across. I stared at it, forcing myself to consider rational explanations. A distorted bear track? Erosion? Shadow? But the detail was undeniable. The ridges of skin were pressed into the mud as if molded there. A cold wave of dread swept through me. The old campfire stories, the blurry films, the whispered legends, they all surged back at once. I'd always dismissed the stories as nothing more than folklore, but now the proof was right in front of me, stamped into the earth. I chose not to tell Emily. I didn't want fear to cloud her judgment. Instead, I snapped a quick photo with my phone, brushed dirt over the track, and hurried back to the creek. "Let's go," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. "We need to make good time today." We hiked for hours, pushing the pace harder than usual, but the sense of being trailed clung to us like a shadow. It was a constant weight pressing between our shoulder blades. Every so often, something flickered at the edge of our vision, a dark shape slipping behind a tree, a shadow darting too quickly to be wind or trick of light. Twice, the undergrowth betrayed it, the sound of something moving alongside us, matching our pace. Heavy, deliberate footfalls, too heavy for a deer, too measured for a bear, and yet impossibly quiet for something of that size. When we paused, it paused. Around midday, we stopped on a rocky outcrop overlooking the valley, grateful for a moment's rest. We ate our trail mix in silence, neither of us willing to name the unease that had followed us all morning. Then it happened, something that shattered the fragile calm I'd been holding on to. From the ridge above and behind us, a rock, larger than my fist, came arcing through the air. It wasn't a random fall. The trajectory was too clean, too deliberate. It struck the granite slab barely 20 feet from where we sat, landing with a sharp, echoing thud. A warning. Emily jolted to her feet. "What was that?" "It's okay," I said, though my voice betrayed the fear I was trying to bury. "Just a loose rock." But even as I said it, both of us turned our eyes upward toward the ridge. The ridge showed nothing, only dark trees and shifting shadows. But we knew better. Something was there, watching, testing. My training took over. We weren't just being followed, we were being hunted. Whatever this was, it had intelligence, and it was territorial. My plan to simply hike out seemed naive now. We weren't escaping, we were being steered. I made a choice. We couldn't outrun it. Not in this terrain. We needed cover, a defensible position. On my map, I remembered a small, long-abandoned ranger cabin about 3 miles ahead. It was our best chance. We pushed hard, almost running. Every snapped twig, every whisper of leaves sent a fresh surge of adrenaline through me. Finally, we broke through the trees into a narrow clearing where the cabin stood. A simple log structure, weathered but still standing. Inside, we shoved an old bed frame against the door and piled our packs against the single grimy window. As night settled over the clearing, the siege began. The wood knocks returned, louder now, closer, encircling us from all directions. Then came the vocalizations, low, resonant moans that seemed to vibrate through the cabin walls, followed by something new. A high, rapid chattering, unnervingly like speech, though in no tongue I recognized. It felt coordinated, communicative, a language. We sat in the dark, the marlin gripped tight in my hands, listening. A sudden heavy thud struck the cabin wall, rattling the timbers. Moments later came the sound of claws or fingers scraping across the wooden shutter that covered the window. Emily pressed into my side, sobbing quietly. I held her close, my chest tight with a primal fear that had nothing to do with my own survival. It was the kind of terror only a father feels, the desperate need to protect, even against the impossible. We were trapped. Cage prey. The assault went on for hours. Knocks, scratches, moans circling the cabin. Then, sometime after 2 a.m, it all stopped. Silence returned, heavy and expectant. We didn't dare sleep. We sat rigid and waiting until the first pale threads of dawn slipped through the gaps in the log walls. September 15th, the final day. When the sun rose fully, the forest outside seemed calm again, almost peaceful. But I knew better. My fear had hardened into cold resolve. We would not be hunted any longer. We were walking out, and we were walking out now. I chambered around into the marlin. "Stay right behind me," I told Emily. "Don't stop for anything." We left the cabin and rejoined the main trail. The trailhead lay just 5 miles ahead, but it might as well have been 1,000. The last stretch of trail wound alongside a wide, shallow stream, hemmed in by dense forest on both sides. We were exposed, vulnerable, and I knew we weren't alone. We pushed forward as fast as we could, splashing straight down the middle of the stream for speed. Then, as we rounded a bend, my chest clenched tight. The air itself seemed to still, charged with static. Every hair on my body rose. I froze and raised a hand for Emily to stop. Across the stream, no more than 70 yards away, a massive figure crouched at the water's edge. It wasn't a bear. Its body was cloaked in long, coarse, dark brown hair, tangled with dirt and flecked with leaves. Its back faced us, but its sheer size was staggering. The shoulders were impossibly broad, twice the span of any man's, and the muscles beneath shifted and rolled as it moved. With one enormous human-like hand, it scooped water and brought it to its mouth, and its head rose to a conical shape, a faint crest visible at the crown. Despite its bulk, there was a startling fluidity to its movements, an effortless grace that didn't belong to something so large. For one reckless instant, instinct warred with fear. The photographer in me wanted to capture it. My main camera was buried in my pack, but my smaller field camera, a Sony RX100, rested in the chest pouch. The tripod was strapped to the outside of my pack, useless in that moment. My hands trembled as I unclipped the tripod, snapped its legs open, and mounted the camera. Every instinct screamed for me to grab the rifle, but another part of me, the part that had spent a lifetime chasing the impossible, demanded I document this. This was it. The proof. I pressed the record button. The frame was perfect. The figure shifted, turning its head as if it had sensed us. Its profile came into view, a haunting fusion of human and ape. A heavy brow sloped low over deep eyes, a broad flat nose, and a jaw built with raw power. It didn't look like a monster. It looked ancient, a remnant, a forgotten offshoot of the primate line that had endured in silence. I eased the zoom, the image crisp on the small screen. My heart thundered. It was real. This was happening. Then it turned fully, and its eyes locked on us. They weren't the vacant eyes of a beast. They were dark amber, deep-set, burning with an intelligence that froze me in place. Recognition was there, followed by a sharp shift, curiosity curdling into hostility. Slowly, impossibly, it rose to its full height, higher and higher until it loomed above the tree line, 9 feet at least. Then it roared. The sound wasn't just heard, it was felt. It slammed into me like a wave, rattling my ribs, shaking the ground beneath my feet, and ripping the very breath from my lungs. It was a declaration, a raw command of dominance, a sound no human was ever meant to endure. "Emily, run!" I shouted, the trance shattering. The camera toppled from my hands, but stayed upright on the tripod, still recording. I ripped the marlin from my shoulder, but the creature was already moving. It was impossibly fast, terrifyingly fast. With 3 colossal splashing strides, it devoured the 60 feet of stream between us. It wasn't running. It was erasing the distance. I threw the rifle to my shoulder, fighting for a clear sight picture, my mind screaming, "Don't miss, don't hit Emily," but it didn't even look at me. Its eyes were locked entirely on her. Just as Emily turned to flee, it reached her. It didn't slash or strike. In one horrifyingly fluid motion, it swept an arm around her waist, lifted her as if she were weightless, and slung her over its shoulder. She let out a single piercing scream, a sound that carved itself into me, a sound I will hear until my last breath. I pulled the trigger. The 4.570 thundered, the recoil slamming into my shoulder, the report echoing through the valley like a cannon. The shot went wide, splintering a tree several yards to the creature's left. Before I could lever in another round, it turned and vanished into the trees, Emily slung over its shoulder. The dense undergrowth swallowed them whole in an instant, for a heartbeat. I stood frozen in shock. Then I roared her name and plunged into the stream, stumbling over the slick rocks as I fought across to the far bank. I charged into the forest where they had disappeared. A trail of broken branches and crushed ferns marked their passage, and I followed it blindly, screaming her name, my voice cracking under the weight of panic and despair. I ran until my lungs seared and my legs buckled, but they were gone. The forest closed in, silent once more, as if nothing had ever happened. I don't know how long I searched. Hours, maybe. By the time I stumbled back to the stream, dusk was falling. I was a hollowed-out shell of myself. There, on the bank, the tripod still stood, a mute witness. Its red light blinked steadily. It had captured everything. The figure, the roar, the abduction. Proof, in unblinking silence. I gathered the camera, hoisted my pack, and began the long, broken walk back to civilization. When I reached the sheriff's office in Weaverville, they looked at me like a madman. Mud-streaked, scratched raw, eyes wild from grief, I spilled out my story. They listened with forced patience, nodding, jotting notes, skepticism thinly veiled behind their faces. They launched a full-scale search and rescue. Helicopters, dogs, dozens of men combing the woods. For 4 days, they scoured every ridge and ravine. They found our campsite. They found the abandoned cabin. They even recovered the single spent rifle casing by the stream. But there was no trace of Emily. No tracks, no clothing, nothing, except my footprints and hers, as if the forest itself had swallowed her whole. The official report was insulting in its simplicity. I had suffered a stress-induced hallucination after a bear attack. Emily had either been dragged off or fled in panic and perished in the wilderness. That was their story. I showed them the video. I handed over my Sony, certain the truth was there. The deputy who took it, a young man with heavy eyes and a weary voice, assured me it would be logged and delivered straight to the sheriff. The next morning when I asked about it, their answer nearly broke me. The file on the memory card, they said, was corrupted, unreadable, a tragic technical failure. My camera was returned, the card wiped clean, but I know the truth. They made a copy, somewhere, locked in an evidence room or passed quietly into other hands. That footage still exists. A few weeks after the official search was abandoned, 2 men in plain dark suits showed up at my door. No badges, no agency, just an unmarked sedan idling at the curb. They didn't need to say much. They told me it would be best for everyone if I stopped telling my story. They warned that insisting on a version of events that contradicted the official report could be considered obstruction, that people in my fragile state sometimes invent false memories to survive trauma. It wasn't a threat, not outright, but the meaning was clear. Stay quiet. But I can't. What they don't know is that I still have the footage. Before I ever handed my camera over, the soldier in me, the disciplined, methodical part that never died, took control. I went to a 24-hour electronics store, bought a cheap laptop and a card reader, and made 2 copies of the file on separate hard drives. Sometimes, when the nightmares close in too heavy, I watch it. 37 seconds. 37 seconds of perfect, undeniable clarity. The creature, its eyes, and the moment it takes my daughter. Proof that I am not insane. Proof that damns me every time I press play. It has been 5 years. My career is gone. My wife is gone. She couldn't live with the shadow of our daughter and the ruin I've become. I sold our house, Now I live in a small, cluttered apartment, stacked with maps, cryptozoology books, and dog-eared sighting reports from every corner of the country. Every dollar I make goes into gear and fuel for long, lonely expeditions back into the Trinity Alps and beyond. The authorities call it trespassing. I call it searching. I'm not the man I was. I'm something else now, a hunter. I move through the forest listening for the silence, tracking the impossible, broken branches high in the canopy, strange tracks in the mud, fleeting shadows at dusk. I'm chasing a 9-foot ghost that walks like a man. Is Emily still alive? Logic says no, but logic died the day I saw the impossible with my own eyes. That thin sliver of hope is what keeps me breathing, what fuels the cold fire in me. I will find the truth. I will find her, or I will die trying. My name is Michael Vance, and my search is not over.